Hi, in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to make a RScript file that is standalone and able to be shared in the form of like a file that someone can source and then just run the contents of. Obviously, this is how I ask you to submit your homework questions that can be auto-graded, so hopefully at this point you figured this out. But the additional property that this allows you to do is use the debug mode, which is really, really cool and a really nice tool to have under your belt if you start to write more advanced R scripts. Okay, so to do that, I have to first clean up this file that I'm currently looking at. So this file does a few different things. It runs some code. Let's try that one more time. It creates a function, it creates an output object, and it does a quick little visualization. Here is the name of the output object. This is me printing out its values. This is not me printing out its values. Cool. So the idea is that I need to create a standalone file, something I could source and nothing happens besides create the function. So let me clear out my environment and show that that's not currently the case. So I've selected this button that says source on save. This is just an easy way to do the sourcing. We can see that when I do that, RStudio actually constructs a proper source function for me. I'm just going to copy that so that I can paste it in a minute. But when I do that, right now, it's creating two things. It's creating a value out because this is running, and it's also like printing off text because I then call that out object, which since it's loose data, just gets printed. So I'm going to delete that. I don't need that here. Or how about this? I'll just comment it out. That's fine. Okay. Now, whenever I run this file, this won't happen. So if I delete these objects just to test things out, hell, I'll even delete that plot just to prove that that's still not happening. When I source it, it just creates that function. That's the behavior I needed. Cool. So I'm going to create a new script just so that I can paste that source function that I copied earlier into to allow me to quickly run this. Okay. So this is where I'll be testing my function from. So from a clean environment, if I source this, I should then be able to just call it and it should work. So all of that works currently. So that all checked, I'm now going to demonstrate debug mode. So debug mode, I'm going to come back over into here. And I'm going to select, like just in this little kind of gray area, white area if you're on a light mode system, I'm going to click. And when I do that, I get this little circle that appears. This is an RStudio thing. And it says breakpoints will be activated when this file is sourced. Okay, let's source this file. That circle has now been filled in. And we can see that my source code has changed. It's now debug source. Okay, this is a lot easier to explain by just showing. Let's try to run this function now. So I don't need to resource this. I don't actually know what will happen if I resource it. Oh, if I just resource it, that actually goes away. So that was kind of fun. Instead, let's debug source it. Okay, so my dot's back now. I didn't really know, I've never done that before. And if I try to run this function, here's what's going to happen. It's going to go inside of the function. So look over here, watch this happen now. Inside the function, I'm on the line of code that I had selected. I can see a little arrow here. This viewer down here has changed. It now says browse to, and it was saying browse 1. That's kind of like your base environment. I'm now inside a second level from my global environment, so I'm inside the functions environment. That's kind of what you have to think through. Inside, I can see that multiple arguments have been created. There is arg1, arg2, arg3, arg4. 1 and 2 were the values that I assigned when I ran out here. So arg1 became this value and arg2 became this value. arg3 is its default value, and indeed arg4 is its default value. What's interesting to know, until I need arg4, so like right here, and then, or until I put its name down here to force it, it actually hadn't created that object, which is a very interesting behavior. It's a subtle one, but it doesn't really affect things too much. But anyways, so now that I've done that, it is going to start to use this data so I can kind of progress line by line. I have these handy little tools. This one says, it's probably too small for you to see, execute the next line of code, skip into the current function call. So if I wanted to go inside of, I guess, minus would be the first function, or execute the remainder of the function or loop. Continue execution until the next breakpoint is encountered. So I just want to keep running it line by line. So I'm going to run this one. Now it's highlighting the entire if statement. So you'll note that that means that if you need to get inside of a if statement, you probably want to actually skip inside. So let's do that. Going inside, I can now just run that line of code. It did go inside. So if that had been false, I assume it would not have gone inside. If I execute this line of code, it's currently plotting. So that worked. And finally, I'm at the return now. And so I can exit. And that's it. I mean, that's a really powerful tool. It allows you to see that internal view. You can see that now that I'm outside of it, my browser has changed back to the normal prompt. It's no longer browse square brackets. That's all cool and all. There is, however, kind of a caveat in, I guess, Y. Let's print I. Okay. For loops make it a little bit challenging. So let's try rerunning that after saving. So I debugged sourced it. And let's try running that again. Okay, so we're back to where I was. I'm going to click next, so it goes through here. I'm just going to click next this time instead of going inside of the if statement. And let me clear off that just so we can see if this happens. So I hit next, it went inside the if statement because the if statement was activated. I hit next again, it did the plotting, and now we're at the for loop, and this is where it's going to get a little bit weird. So I'm going to hit next, and when I go inside, I can see not a whole lot has changed. However, it has created I at the first value of Y. So I'm going to hit next, and now it's the second value of Y. Now I hit next, is the second value of Y, and so forth. So I'm able to just keep hitting next. We're almost to the end, and now we get to the return. So not too bad. It's only really kind of complicated if you're not using those little like buttons at the top to go through your code. So really my general recommendation is just use those buttons to go through the code. But it turns out you can just run it line by line like you would normally in a script file. So I'm going to start pressing Control Enter. Cool. Y's now been created. Let me make this a little bit smaller and minimize my plot. So I'm inside again. I'm going to run the if statement. When I do that, I can see that I've now created browse 3. And the reason why is that this is like a new little tiny environment, the inside of the if statement. If I need this to complete, I need to actually continue. So now that I hit continued, I've exited out of that little kind of tiny chunk of code that was in its own little debug mode. And now I'm going to go through the for statement. That one did just run. And so now I can return and I exit. But hitting that continue just occurs whenever you encounter a chunk of code inside of this debug mode. The really easy way to avoid it is instead of trying to run it line by line, continue using that little those little buttons. That's really it. What do I do? I'm probably most commonly browsing through line by line and just dealing with that internal environment whenever it occurs by hitting continue if needed. But you know, it's a big tool, and so those are just a couple of different strategies to help you deal with that. So hopefully that helps. Have a good one. Stop button.